Penn State loses to Michigan 24-15. Welcome into a post-game recap here on Locked On Nittany Lions. I am Zach Seyko, your host, and I'm joined by Penn State Rivals editor, and that is Dylan Callaghan-Croley, and then associate producer with the show for Locked On Nittany Lions, Zane Brancefield. And we're talking about this one. I want to take a poll here. Mike Yurcich, Drew Allar, where do we begin? Is the program in shambles? Because obviously people are fed up. I'll own that I picked Penn State over Michigan, but Michigan's clearly the better football team, and it did not matter that they did not have Jim Harbaugh on the sideline. They did not have a head coach. They were still able to win. I think it's fair to start with the coaching because the play calling left me scratching my head at points. James Franklin actually called it out in the postgame press conference, guys. You were there with me when Drew Allar, he was asked about Drew Allar's performance, and he said, well, we should have gave Drew, plays should have been called to give Drew some more confidence, some easier throws. I thought he was going to criticize Drew saying, okay, Allar didn't do this, Allar didn't do that, without completely throwing him under the bus. But instead it was, play calling's got to be better. Whoa. So Dylan, the play calling was definitely not good. I don't like that on fourth down and short plays, you're having a running back throwback from Katron Allen to Drew Allar. Michigan just runs the football. They just say, we're going to put our eight best linemen on the field and push you 2 yards. And it was embarrassing the way they reset the line of scrimmage on those offensive line from Michigan's offensive line. But besides the point, but Michigan on 3rd and 2 out of shotgun with a J.J. McCarthy who's banged up says, we're running it and you can't stop us. Penn State on 4th and 1, pitch to Katron. He's obviously throwing it. And then it's a pitch back to Drew Allar. Like, what the heck? What the heck?
Yeah, there's a lot of places you could start with this offensive play calling on Saturday for Penn State. It was uninspiring, I think, is one word you could use for it. There was, the run game had a good day. They averaged 4.7 yards per carry, somewhere in that range. Yep. They had a good day for the most part, but the creativity when it came to second and medium, third and medium, in those situations, it just wasn't there for Mike Yurcich. And, Yurcich coming into this year did some nice things last year for Penn State. 2021, he obviously struggled. And this year, I think it's safe to say it's been a struggle for Mike Yurcich once again. And the two biggest games of the season for Penn State have been his worst called games of the year.
Yeah.
You said it, James Franklin called out Mike Yurcich in the postgame press conference, saying they have to get play calling they have to use play calling that gets Drew into rhythm early. James isn't one to call out his coordinators in press conferences very much. This is a guy, if people remember, he had to be pushed to fire John Donovan nearly a decade ago. He had to be pushed to make that type of decision. So I think that's very telling of James' thought process right now. I'm not saying James is going to come out and fire Mike Yurcich, but Mike Yurcich is definitely somebody who I think we need to start talking a little bit more about it when it comes to his impact and his game calling this season. Yes, Penn State's wide receiver personnel is not there this season. Drew has not taken the steps forward that Penn State would have hoped for this year. But at the end of the day, two biggest games of the season, Mike Yurcich has called two pretty below average game. If you had to grade out his play calling today, I think it can't go much higher than a D plus. There's just not many positives you can talk about from Mike Yurcich today. I thought the offensive line for the most part played pretty well today against that Michigan
I'd give him a B plus, A minus with the way the pass protection was there. Drew Allar had time, and the running backs were getting they averaged over 4.5 yards per carry.
Drew's struggles today wasn't on the offensive line. Drew's struggles today were on the offense. He had guys open. He rushed throws. He was inaccurate. He's looked like a kid in the two biggest games of the season who, despite what we have thought, is not ready for these types of games. That's what he looks like, at least. Maybe they talk about what they see in practice every day that we're not there as media. That may show one thing, but what we've seen on the field now in two of Penn State's biggest games is that Drew's not ready for these type of moments. And like I said, there was opportunities there for Drew to be made today. He made them with his legs. But when it comes to making a decision to throw the ball deep in the air at times, like you said, he looks scared to throw an interception still, despite getting that interception against Indiana out of the way.
So we've jumped now to Drew Allar. So I don't know that there's much else to say about a Mike Yurcich. The play calling was not good. I'm not going to sit here on this platform and to try to ruin a man's livelihood. Okay, up to this point, right? He called how many games that led to 30+ points, but in the games that matter the most, 15 and 12, 15 and 12 against Michigan and Ohio State does not get it done.
Yeah, but we've seen him have strong games against top 10 teams in the past. I mean, I forget what Utah's exact ranking was in the Rose Bowl, but Utah was a very
that was a
good
top
team.
10 defense.
Top 10, great defense. Penn State was having a day against Utah in the Rose Bowl, but I mean, there's just been no creativity in this Penn State offense all year, and against Michigan, they had that creativity on a fourth down, but that's not the time. Really,
it feels like it shouldn't be needed.
It worked out in that situation. But that's really the only time we saw creativity from this Penn State offense today. James Franklin, coming into the week, talked about how Penn State needed to take multiple shots in this game to win. We didn't see Penn State take a shot in this game.
I said turnovers would be the key in this one, because now forcing turnovers against Michigan is a very tall task, but you had 2 fumbles that occurred. Blake Corum, you don't land on it. That would have been a game changer. Drew Allar losing the football there. Again, you could only put it in your quarterback's hands to run it so many times before something like that happens. And I know that's an incident you almost can't even begin to predict, but you're almost kind of rolling the dice every time you put it into a ball carrier who's not as reassuring as a Singleton, a Katron Allen. And I still don't know that we see enough of Trey Potts at all, but that's a different conversation. We have a full week to talk about this. Zane, you've been patient. You've been very patient. So let's talk about Drew Allar in this case. There's more about Mike Yurcich that we can discuss, but in this time frame here on the field, Drew Allar looks like, I'm going to pull a mad dog here, does look like a deer in headlights at times. He's timid. He is timid. And when your quarterback, your leader on the offense, the face of your team, the face of your program right now is Drew Allar, is playing the way that he is, too much pressure on his shoulders, not playing relaxed, not playing with a fire, with a passion. I think he's putting all the work in the world, but I also think that with that effort that he's putting in, it's coming with a lot of unnecessary pressure, and it is holding him back. J.J. McCarthy did not have a good day, but Michigan ran it a bunch of times and took pressure off of him. But for Drew Allar, Zane, what are you seeing from him that makes you say he's not taking the step forward? Because that's the easy conclusion we've come to, but why do you think this is?
Well, I think the biggest thing is, first of all, he's a 19-year-old college kid who, it's like he's only played a few games at Penn State. He has 10 starts at Penn State
Yep.
in his career, that's not a lot at all. You look at a lot of the other guys, it takes some time, but the question is, why is it taking him so long to develop when other guys are taking those big steps? And I think you have to look at the system that he's in, certain players and stuff are all factors that go in, but I think a lot of it comes down to his mentality, and I think Drew Allar needs to kind of figure out where he's at in that sense. Not that he's not trying, not that he doesn't want to compete. He's very competitive. You can tell he's very emotional after the games, but he needs to kind of flip a switch in his head where he's like, I'm just going to kind of throw the ball out there. A couple weeks ago when we were talking about just chuck it deep. Well, not necessarily put it in harm's way, but Drew Allar does need to throw the ball more. He's not throwing or having many attempts when he's in the game at quarterback, and Penn State needs to give him more looks. But even Franklin talked, some of the plays that they have, they're going to pass or they're going to run, and they have to switch based on what the defense gives them. But Drew Allar obviously needs to throw the ball more, and that just comes with time. It comes with confidence, and it's something last year we were talking, Sean Clifford did that a lot. He had confidence. He didn't care what anybody thought. Drew Allar here, he had 1 interception going into today, and he was still acting like he couldn't mess up. There was a lot on the line. It's the kid needs to just go out there, play football like he did in high school. In high school, it didn't matter. He was just throwing the ball around. He needs to do it again.
He played very loose, and I'm glad that you brought up the emotional aspect of it. And this is a bigger picture type of stuff, but I want to compare it to a Michigan team. Emotion is not a bad thing, but it's how you handle it. We saw a lot of emotion after the Ohio State game, again after this game, because Penn State knows that it missed an opportunity with an elite defense like this. This is the type of defense that wins you, that gets you into the top 4, and they missed out because the offense didn't hold up its end of the bargain. The coaching staff didn't hold up its end of the bargain, but the defense has done everything right to this point. And you can't blame the defense for giving up that late touchdown to a Blake Corum when, you got to come back out on the field after another short drive. You go for it on 4th down and you're, at your 30 trying to defend your goal there. But emotion. Michigan was emotional, but Michigan channeled it differently. Penn State was emotional, and I'm not saying they channeled it the wrong way, but Michigan handles emotion better. So that's got to go along with coaching. That's got to go along with mentality and everything else. I felt like, and I've said this before and I'll reiterate it, Penn State's level of serious coming into both of these games, more so in Ohio State, but also Michigan, just didn't feel like it was there. And I talked about Jim Harbaugh's suspension. I didn't like this. I didn't like Harbaugh's suspension coming less than 24 hours before this game, because not only did it give Michigan an extra flair, a little bit of bulletin board material, and people might say, well, that's fraudulent, that's not real, that's a myth, they need to go out and execute on the X's and O's. These are emotional, young adult men, some of them still teenagers, kids, like Zane has said, but also emotions are going to be rampant at this level of football where it's a little more business-like in the NFL. So with that being said, I think Michigan has done a great job showing that it can not only channel that emotion, but also keep it in check and not be, because a bull in a china shop, you're breaking everything, and that's not right. And I feel like that's where Penn State is. There's that huge letdown, and they're not handling the emotion well, Dylan.
Yeah, and I think that goes for the players. And there's multiple calls in this game that Penn State had that we all agree were questionable.
Yeah.
And I wonder, were some of those due to, the emotions in the moment? I mean, people will point to that first half 2-point attempt. That was whatever. But fourth quarter, going for it on 4th down in that situation, when you said points were at a premium,
You have two timeouts.
Yep.
You still have enough time. You had over 4 minutes, and you're
with
not
a punter
punting.
having a decent day.
Yeah. So, and the defense held up its end of the bargain once again. You held Michigan to 17 points at that point in the game, and I understand if you have no timeouts and everything else, but the situation did not dictate that decision going for it on 4th down and then going for 2. When you just completely, now, if you don't get it, you took your team completely out of the game, and I'm glad that was addressed in the press conference, even though the exchange wasn't exactly pretty.
And the defense, people are going to point to Michigan rushing numbers. Michigan had 2 really good drives in the first half that both resulted in touchdowns. In the second half, both scoring drives, a field goal and a touchdown for the Wolverines, came on short field. The defense in the second half was phenomenal. Michigan had completely abandoned the passing game in this game because they couldn't block the front seven of Penn State. Penn State dominated the front seven in this game. Michigan abandoned and finished, I think, with 32 consecutive runs, not counting a DPI, which there were some questionable missed calls in this game, particularly on that one drive for Michigan. But, I mean, it just, there's multiple things. This is a game for Penn State fans, beat writers, anybody in between that can go back. You can look at so many different plays and calls in this game that ultimately decided. But at the end of the day, I think we saw still the difference of where Penn State wants to be, which is where Michigan is right now, and where Penn State is. And a couple years ago, these two programs were neck and neck. Penn State may have had the edge. Right now, I don't think it's particularly close, and I think Michigan is by far the better program right now. And that's a testament to Jim Harbaugh. And I know a lot of people are going to say, the cheating scandal stuff, but at the end of the day, Michigan State lost our head coach for 3 weeks. It'll probably be a little shorter, but 3 weeks, less than 24 hours ago. And today they came out and it didn't look like they bothered them at all.
Decision making was questionable. It was bad at times. I did not, on the sideline, seeing that in the final 5 minutes, for Penn State to go for that. And essentially, if they don't get the 2-point conversion, you now have taken your team out of the game when you had 2 timeouts. There were 2 minutes left in the game. You could have stopped them the way that college football runs, right? You get those stops. The clock stops after you get a first down. Who's to say that it's 24-16? You kick it off. You put Michigan at the 25. J.J. McCarthy's banged up, because that's what hurt Penn State in this game, was McCarthy's legs. They would get Michigan in third and medium, 7, 8, and it was McCarthy's legs that were the difference maker that bailed them out in those situations, not his arm. So Penn State kind of had a little bit of a break with McCarthy getting banged up. So with that in mind, why are you going for 2? And you deflated the entire team by now forcing to kick an onside kick, not getting it. And you would have gotten the ball back if you stopped them and enforced a 3 and out with 1:20 to go. The college football clock rules. And I don't know why the team wasn't set up to do that.
And James contradicted himself in the post-game press conference. Yep. He said that he went for 2 in the first half, which analytically, I know people didn't like it.
I was okay with that.
But analytically,
14-11, that's the hypothetical score if you get
analytically, it says to go for it in that situation. That was the right decision. Yep. But when Penn State scored the fourth quarter touchdown right here to Theo Johnson, decision to go for 2 right there. If you don't get that, it ices the game. It's a 2-score game. You go for the field goal, it's an 8-point game. You still have to get the 2-point conversion.
You have a chance.
But theoretically, you're alive. That decision, also, that was the game.
I get it with no timeouts or the I honestly no. I don't get it without any timeouts, or the clock is maybe at 1 minute to go. When you had 2 minutes and 2 timeouts, that makes it worse.
And
Zane, what are your thoughts on that?
I have a question to pose to both of you then as well.
Well, yeah, because they still have to go down and get the other score anyway. So it's like at that point, why are you even forcing it? Like, just get the easy extra point and go down the field.
Because it's still a 1 score. It's a 1.5 score game.
Yeah, and they're just making their lives a lot more difficult if they missed a 2-point conversion. If you just make that, you're still in the game.
And that was it.
Dylan
Michigan,
said.
All they had to do was sit. They knew they won right after that.
Yeah.
I think the sideline knew that they won by Penn State taking a very unnecessary gamble. Okay,
I think the fans knew that too. The fans started to leave after that as well.
The fans started to leave after the Blake Corum touchdown. But in addition to that, right, you had the first wave and then the second wave. Dylan, what is your question?
My question for you two here, and after this game, Penn State has Rutgers, Michigan State. Those are 2 games Penn State should absolutely win. I think that Rutgers game may be a lot closer than a lot of people think.
That's not going to be as fun as people think it is.
And that's a program, but Penn State historically doesn't.
I know, but Rutgers is a disciplined team, and now
what I'm saying is they don't historically whoop Rutgers like they whoop Maryland. They play Maryland, they blow out Maryland yearly.
Yeah,
Rutgers, Penn State usually comes out slow against and wins, 29-0, not 55, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Sure,
it's ugly.
I get your point.
Ugly performances. Penn State should go 10-2 this year, but at the end of the day, for fans, this is a lost season. The team you had, the defense they had.
They know it.
They should have 11-1 should have been record this year. Mm-hmm. They could have beat both Ohio State and Michigan. There was avenues for an undefeated season.
Yes.
Yep.
Which loss do you think is more damning for the Nittany Lions this season? Was it the Ohio State loss or was it the Michigan loss? I lean the Michigan loss because after there is nothing after this. There is no rectifying.
What, are you happy about the Peach Bowl?
I mean, and if they win a Peach Bowl, if they win a New Year's Six Bowl, great. That the program went to New Year's.
But in the scheme of thing, when you had the goals,
yes, when you had the goals, but I mean, a Peach Bowl is not as fun for a fan as a Rose Bowl. A Rose Bowl, especially in Big Ten country, still means something.
No.
There's nothing that will save this season. No matter what they do going forward, I think for fans, they're gonna ultimately it's a 10-2 season, but fans are gonna look back at this season as ultimately as a failure because Penn State had the defense to do something this year, but
and you lose that next season. You'll get the entire just about 99% of the offense back, say Olu Fashion or Theo Johnson. I'm not going to dive too much away from this conversation, but yes, you had I said it to start this episode. You had the elite defense and you fumbled it, and even without Jim Harbaugh on the sideline, that opposing sideline over there, Penn State was still outcoached in a variety of ways in this game.
Yeah, so I guess that's my question for you guys. Which one do you think is more indicative of where this Penn State program is heading into 2024? Because, I mean, the season's mostly over. There's 3 games left, but...
I'll be quickly. I want to hear Zane's thoughts on this. Ohio State was more of a matter of talent and execution.
Yeah.
I feel like Penn State, I will put that one more on the players.
Sure.
I feel like the coaches let down Penn State in this one. So I think the players did as much as they could, but if you go to the Ohio State game, I feel like the players bear a little more responsibility. Yeah. Zane, your thoughts?
I think this loss today against Michigan was definitely a lot tougher for the guys. It was like So like you lose to Ohio State, obviously they always say it's like tough to win in college football.
Yep.
So you lose. It's
You
really
still
hard.
have this game.
Yeah, it's hard to go undefeated, and then you get this lifeline. They're like, okay, you guys can still make it if you beat Michigan, and then you guys lose. It's like you said, you're losing your defense. Your offense will be back.
Pressure was too much.
You got all these guys, and it's tough. Like when all the media and all the fans and the players are like, this is our year, and then you just kind of lose it all. Like it feels like they have nothing now. All the players and after the press conference and everything, they were in there and we were talking to them, and a lot of them were crying. It was tough for them. It's like understandable. Like you want to win, and
the loss in the stadium from the final moments to press conferences. This one definitely felt a little bit different than other big losses. I mean, out here last year against Ohio State, tough loss, but it definitely felt a lot different than this one.
The goals were different. Everybody had set the bar at, well, Penn State, if they go 7-5, 8-4, I guess that's an okay season. Then they went 10-2 and they won the Rose Bowl. But then the goals jumped significantly, astronomically. They went from 8-4 with Sean Clifford to now the 5-star quarterback. And we're thinking at least 11-1, right? Like you said at least 11-1, undefeated, college football playoff. The defense was capable of that. I'm disappointed because Drew Allar, we've all agreed here that Drew Allar's development is not where it should be. So we'll keep this brief just to wrap it up. But the final idea with this, and because fans were screaming things at the Penn State sideline. There was a lot of ruckus on the field. Michigan was holding, signs up saying, we don't need a coach to win, and different phrases and everything just to kind of antagonize Penn. I mean, they hold the bragging rights. They have the right to do that. It's college football. Emotions are high. Is it a little slimy given all the allegations and everything? Yes, but you won, so you get to continue to brag. Okay, so now you're here again, 10-2, once again. Best case scenario. This is really bad if you lose somehow to Michigan State or Rutgers. And right now, I'm not saying they lose to Rutgers, but I do not feel good about it because, as we've seen traditionally, James Franklin teams do not respond well after these kinds of losses. But that's not my question. That's not my topic here. People are going to be loud and proud about fire James Franklin again. People are going to be loud and proud about fire Mike Yurcich. I am not in the boat of fire James Franklin. There were fellow media members that were kind of discussing things like everything's out there now. There's really no more excuses or what ifs or caveats or anything else. James Franklin's 4-16 against Ohio State and Michigan. He does not have any winning records against top 25 teams at home or on the road. Can Penn State fans, can the Penn State media accept that this might be the ceiling? The 10-2 and the New Year's Six Bowl. Now it's like, well, there's the 12-team college football playoff. Zane, I want to start with you. But then, so that's going to translate to probably 9-3. The ceiling's going to become what, 9-3, and then an early exit in the college football playoff.
Well, like you mentioned, the 12-team playoff. It's like, but it doesn't mean as much then to the fans. Like it's a lot harder
unless you make it to the semifinal.
You're moving the goal, that's where it goes. You're moving the goalpost.
It's a lot harder to make a 14 playoff, and that's what Penn State wants to be the best. So like unless they somehow still make
but that's what I'm saying, an early exit. So you make the college football playoff as whatever, a 7 seed, you're hosting that home game, then you get to the semifinal, and then you get blown out by an elite team. That's what things are trending towards, and because the Big Ten schedule gets harder, now you're going to have 9-3, and maybe some 8-4 seasons. So the forever 10-2 moniker is probably going to go away as well, because now you got Washington, Wisconsin, Ohio State. That stretch next season is not good, especially if things don't break your way. So, but that's the point. The point is everyone okay with this standard? Do you take the risk of losing everything that's been built over the past decade for what? Where do you go if you were going to make a change? Because you can't go anywhere.
I'm going to give a non-answer here. This is
we're used to those.
That's Pat Kraft's decision.
That's why he's paid the big bucks. We just get to talk about it.
That's his decision to make here. I think James Franklin's a very good college football coach. I don't think there's any denying that. You look at the resume, there's a lot of coaches that would die to have the resume.
There's a lot of how about Maryland? Maryland would love to go 10-2 and be in a New Year's Six Bowl.
Yes.
And they might miss. They might go 5-7 and miss. I know they're playing today and everything.
Is Penn State a national championship caliber program on a consistent basis? I don't know if they are there. Do I think they could be a national championship contender every few years, I think they absolutely could put together teams. This year, they have the defense to be that type of team.
They were supposed to, and that's why this really stings.
The offense clearly isn't there. I think ultimately, though, you look at Penn State over the last few years with James Franklin. Of all the good he's done, there's also been these tough losses, and these tough losses are usually, by the smallest of margins. And at the end of the day, yes, players have to make plays, but also a lot of these issues have come down to coaching decisions and those type of things. And I think for Penn State fans, that's where it gets, the most frustrating is that some of these losses aren't on the players. Some of these come back down to Franklin, his coaching decisions, the staff's decisions of who to play, who not to play, and those types of things. So, I mean, at the end of the day, I think James Franklin and his staff have a lot of soul searching to do. These two losses, I think, speak a lot about what the program is right now. Like I said, I think James Franklin's a very good head coach. I think he could win a national championship at the right place. But I will also say I'm not sure that right now Penn State is that place where he can win a national championship. I think
it's a tough pill to swallow.
It's one of those things where, like I said, I think he's a great coach. I think he's a great recruiter. He has a lot going for him. I think he's a guy who could win a national championship.
If he were to leave, or things where people, let's just agree to move on.
Yeah.
James Franklin would still have a lot. He had success at Vanderbilt, of all places.
He's always going to have a job in college football. He'll always have a job in college football. But I think at the end of the day, at what point 10 years in does when is enough data points
It's set in stone at this point. I don't think there's any more question marks.
Without giving names, we heard a rather prominent reporter say something similar in the elevator. There is enough there that shows what James Franklin is and what James Franklin isn't. And now it's up to the Penn State administration to decide. There's $80 million buyout. They're not going to buy out James Franklin. Let's get that straight. There's no chance of that. But there's a lot of soul searching I think the program has to do, and that starts to Pat Kraft all the way down to James Franklin and those under him. And they got to figure out why the program isn't getting to where they want it, and they got to figure out fast on how to get the program there, because in 1 year, less than a year, you got 4 new programs entering this conference. Yep. And while I think Washington, USC are going to maybe have a little bit of a hard time adjusting, I think Oregon is in a prime position to jump into the Big Ten and be one of the top programs right away.
And I think Texas A&M is, if you want to look for something comparable, a comparable situation, it's Texas A&M and Jimbo Fisher, because he won a national title at Florida State. That's nice that he did win one, but it's not translating into Texas A&M, and he's got the consistent top 3 recruiting classes, right? Penn State will get a top 10 or sneak into the top 10, but consistently top 15. You have an insane NIL backing at Texas A&M. The point is not to deviate attention. But Zane, any final thoughts on this? I think, we're approaching a half hour on this one episode, standing here in Beaver Stadium, but the conversation needed to be extensive because there's so much to discuss.
And we could probably go for another 30 minutes.
I could. No one's kicking us out. I really
wanted to, we could go 30 minutes. And listen, for me, I just think the outside excuses for James Franklin, the facilities, the NIL, those are starting to run out. NIL is still a little bit of an issue, but it's definitely a lot better than it was.
Well, it's not the best in the world, but it is better.
A lot better than it was a year ago.
Facilities,
he's running out of these type of things to point to of why the program's not where it comes to be. At one point or another, James Franklin has to definitely, start pointing fingers at himself and his coaching staff of why this program isn't getting to that point, because, Jim Harbaugh, 2 years ago was looking like he may get fired, and 2 years later, Michigan's knocking on the door.
Bona fide college football playoff contender. There's really no debate. It must be nice. It really must be nice, Zane.
But kind of final thoughts, just like Dylan was saying, there's a lot of things that need to be happening over this offseason for Penn State.
Yep.
A lot of things they need to consider. Who do they keep? Who do they not? Even if they don't fire anybody, do they bring somebody else in and maybe just kind of work things out? It's a lot of things that Penn State has to figure out, and that's all up to Pat Kraft. And I don't think there's really anything else we can talk about in that aspect. I think it's just something Penn State has to figure out internally and discuss for themselves, and nothing they're going to say publicly, obviously, for a long time.
This season was a disappointment. I hope it doesn't get any worse, because 9-3, 8-4 is certainly a bad look. I'm not implying that Penn State's going to lose those games, but if it does happen, things can go from bad to worse, because this did have the potential to be at least an 11-1 team, like Dylan said, and I've said that on the podcast for the longest time now, and Penn State didn't do that. So this one hurts even more for them, because they knew what goals they had. They told us those goals. We told them to you, and they didn't accomplish any of them. So that's going to do it here for this in-stadium episode of Locked On Nittany Lions. I encourage everyone to subscribe to the channel, subscribe wherever you get your podcast, subscribe to HappyValleyInsider.com. Penn State Rivals Dylan helps me out a ton with his analysis. You can follow myself, Dylan, Zane, all on X, Twitter, and keep it right here for more Penn State football content. The season's far from over. We have more to discuss here on Locked On Nittany Lions.